Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and welcome to This Week in Mythic Plus. This week's affixes are Fortified, Raging, Quaking, and of course, Thundering. It's a little bit of a surprisingly nasty week. This was our first week of the season, so you may remember it from week one. But it's an affix combo that catches people off guard, because a lot of people evaluate this week to be quite easy looking. They're like, oh yeah, Raging, I don't really think too much about that. Quaking, okay, that's a little annoying. And then, oh yeah, Fortified, it shouldn't be too bad. The thing is, the combination of Raging and Fortified, right? Raging, enemies do extra damage at low health. Fortified, all the trash enemies do extra damage. Actually creates a lot of really, really nasty trash enemies. So for instance, we could look at Ruby Life Pools, and you can think of just like, man, these Blazebound Destroyer casts when they're low on health. This Lightning Storm when it's low on health, this Lightning Storm when it's low on health, all of these are going to be dealing a lot of extra damage, not to mention like the dragons. So if you have the ability to, if you're playing with or as a class that can talent into a Enrage Soothe effect, something to dispel that, that's really valuable this week, especially for dungeons like Ruby Life Pools, where there are a lot of trash enemies that do group-wide damage that is already dangerous, that becomes turbo lethal while raging. So you want to look out for that if you can. That's going to save you quite a bit of trouble. The general rule for like an average trash pull that's not got one of these things in it is saving AoE CCs, saving tank defensives for the end of the pull rather than the start of the pull. Can be a good way to manage this affix, or if it's the kind of pull, the kind of key level where you need to send those things on pull, then you could instead kite a little bit at the end of the pull. There's nothing wrong in, especially as a tank, kiting at the end of the pull, you're going to have full threat on everything, so you can do that as mobs start raging, and it can be a good way to mitigate that affix. The Quaking affix, on the other hand, doesn't really interact with the other ones too much, but it is very lethal. It's another affix that it's a combination of like annoying and actually surprisingly deadly. The big thing that Quaking interacts with in a bad way is Thundering. Now, both Quaking and Thundering are on predictable timers, and a lot of people don't know this or have WeakAuras to do it, but if you search either of the affix names on the WeakAuras site, you can find a bunch of WeakAuras for both that will show you their timers, and they're better ones than the ones that I'm using, but you can put up a timer, and the way that Quaking works is every 20 seconds, the game decides randomly whether there's going to be a quake or not. I don't actually know what the chance is every 20 seconds. I think it's over 50%, but I'm not sure. And that's the only time a quake can happen. Meanwhile, Thundering is also on a little over a 1 minute ICD on how long it happens, and then it will always come out at or around that time as well. I think there's a few seconds of delay, and also it pauses out of combat, whereas Quaking does not. So using this, you can look at those two timers and see if there's going to be a possible overlap between the two affixes. And if there is, just clear your Thundering early, right? There's no shame in clearing your Thundering at 10, 7, 15 even. Just get that Thundering out of the way. Don't wipe to the Thundering Quaking combo. If you do have the Thundering Quaking combo, if you haven't looked at the affix, right, and if you realize, oh no, I'm going to clear and there's a Quaking circle spawning on me right now, tank the Quaking, right? It's better to tank the Quaking to take 40% of your health as physical damage versus getting Thundering stunned and take 150% of your health as nature damage and be stunned for 6 seconds, right? So just clear and deal with the Quake as it happens. Pop a defensive if you need to, but try and just clear early in that situation to mitigate that as well. Beyond that, the main affix, yeah, it's going to be the Raging Fortified combo that's going to dictate how you can pull this week, right? Dictate the sorts of things that you want to do. There are some ways that you can skip a lot of the nasty enemies. For instance, this Tempest Channeler, you could try shrouding through here. You could skip these things pretty easily with a shroud and running through, or invis pots as well. So that can be a way to remove. You can look at your pathing and remove enemies that are particularly nasty. You could skip both the dragons, although if you're skipping these and both the dragons, then you're probably pulling juggernauts and doing a lot of stuff down here, which maybe you're not a fan of as well, so always got to think about that. Another tool, another way that people... I get this question a lot, or I see it in pugs a lot, where people just are like, are we short count? I don't know. You can pretty quickly check in MDT if you're going to be short count, which is not really related to this week, but I figured I would show it off in this video because sometimes people don't know this. So the example is, I actually have this selected here, is in Ruby Life Pools, but let's say that you're like oh, I don't know. I'm at 65% count. You know, is this enough before Kokia, or do I need to do another pull? Now you can pop up MDT really quick, and you just want a nice empty route, right? Nothing selected, and just click all the mobs after the boss, right? So if these weren't clicked, it would be just the 5 clicks, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 clicks. And you can see, all right, this is going to give me 29%, right? 29.3. So by the powers of subtraction, we know that we need to be at 71%, right? In order to finish Kokia and then do all the rest of the trash and finish the dungeon. So 65% is not going to be enough for us. So we could try adding another pull. Oh, that doesn't put us up to 35% yet, right? So we would actually need to do potentially even more than, you know, this patrol that sometimes gets skipped, right? So maybe our plan is after boss, we're going to jump down and do another pull. Or maybe we're going to add this cursed shockcaster thing and try and deal with it. Who knows how we're going to solve this, right? But we can do this, and we can look at this, and it can take us, you know, this takes a few seconds, but you could do this during the run, right? During the mounted run from here to here, where you're kind of looking at it. Obviously, you don't know you're going to be at 65% yet, or you can do it while your healer is drinking before you pull this boss. You just look at your count, and you see that. And eventually, you can kind of learn these percentages. There are also some WeakAuras that will put up reminder text in different dungeons that will be like, hey, here's the percent you need before this boss, and you can go and change in the options. If you're planning on doing something like skipping these things, right, then you can go into the options and change the percents that it will tell you based on that. So that's a little tip for the week. Besides that, dungeons this week, again, the big thing to do is just kind of look through and try and identify the enemies that are going to be the, you know, the massive threats of Raging Fortified this week. There are 2 different kinds of types, right? There's the AoE damage type, and then there's I guess there's 3, right? There's AoE damagers, then there's also the one-shot your tanks, right? So, like, these storm shields can kind of one-shot your tanks if you're not careful, especially if you're playing with a tank that's weak to magic damage, because they do, their melee attacks inflict 50% additional nature damage. They do a lot of extra damage to your tank. So those are things to look out for your tank. Then there's the kind that will one-shot random people in your group with stuff like Stormbolt, so make sure you have kicks for those. And if you don't, then make sure that whoever's being targeted pops a big defensive. And then there's the kind that just one-shot your whole group, right? Which is stuff like if you let a Tempest cast go off, right? That sort of thing is going to be that sort of threat. Or, you know, I guess in this area there's the longbows that's kind of like you got to dodge the swirlies, and there's the war spears. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about war spears. This is a final bonus tip, again, just specific for not good offensive. War spears do this ability called Swift Stab. They do it like every 12 to 15 seconds, and they will charge. It says primary target, but they always choose the farthest target for this. So they choose the farthest target, they charge at them, they do a bunch of upfront damage, and then they leave behind a nasty bleed. You can actually stop this if you stun, root, knock, anything like that them during their charge, then you've stopped that damage entirely. Or if the person who's being targeted gets far enough away from where they were when the cast started, then they can also dodge it. So something like a blink, wild charge, those sorts of things can get you out of the way of this ability and remove the damage from it. Now, especially when these mobs are raging, that can be really good, especially on like this double War Spear pull. So what I recommend for this is Ursul's Vortex. If you have a druid, makes it entirely free. You just wait until they drop below 30% and they're raging. And then if you have a Soothe, obviously you can just soothe them, and you could just do this Vortex on any of them. But otherwise, save it for the raging one and put down a Vortex, and then they'll just try and run and charge somebody and just get grip back in. And you've effectively removed 600k damage that they were going to do or something like that for very free. So that's a little tip for this area. All right. Good luck in your keys this week. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one. Bye.